Episode 5 of Shogun has just been released, and following the previous episode where we saw Jozen and the men getting attacked by Nagakado, it always felt like this episode was going to be the calm before the storm that will inevitably be arriving with Ishido and Toranaga going to war. And considering that this was most definitely the calm, there was still a lack of stability to the calmness that was present. With an earthquake wiping out a lot of Izu and almost killing Lord Toranaga, us seeing the true side to Toda Buntaro, as well as witnessing Mariko's secret. The most dangerous thing, however, of the entire episode was Lady Ochiba's return and her giving off pure Cersei Lannister vibes. So with that, let's jump into the episode and break down all that there was to take away from it. Here is Shogun Episode 5 Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. This week's episode opened up with us seeing the aftermath of what occurred in the previous episode, and there were many people that were tasked with taking care of the dead. This was where we were introduced to two very important people in the entirety of the episode. First, the gardener, who went on to have a large focus at the end of the episode. This was somebody who it seemed like John Blackthorne actually grew some kind of connection with over the period of time that he was there. And also Tonomoto Akinao, the spy that Yabushige had spent the entirety of the episode looking for, somebody who was in fact Toranaga's long-serving prized samurai. During this opening section, there was a large noise that approached, and it was Toranaga arriving back in Izu with his men, and alongside him was Toda Buntaro, Mariko's husband, who we believed was killed a couple of episodes back when he faced Ishido's men on his own. However, I feel none of us really believed that he was dead. The moment that Toda Buntaro appeared, Mariko's face went back to having some kind of fear that was present within it. When you think about how she'd been these past couple of episodes with John Blackthorne, she was almost like a completely different person. She was smiling and was enjoying being with him. However, following them being intimate with one another in the previous episode, she knew that if he ever found out about that, then the both of them could be killed. As was mentioned, in the context of the show, a man's wife is their property and they can do what they want with them. So his abusive nature also came out when he attacked Mariko after the evening that they spent with Blackthorne, something which showed his true colors for the first time. The emblem of the banners that Toranaga was flying is the actual emblem of Ieyasu Tokugawa, who is the real person that inspired Yoshi Toranaga, so I thought it was interesting that they used the same banners. Back in Osaka, Toranaga's betrayal and escape was something which was impacting the Council of Regents. They felt as though it was embarrassing for them, but not only that, they felt it was disrespectful to Lady Ochiba, somebody who made a real impactful appearance at the end. There was clear division amongst them over who to elect to replace Toranaga. Ishido wanted it to be Maeda, but Sugiyama didn't want her, and with the way that Sugiyama was acting at the end of the session, it feels like something could end up happening to him, which might mean that the council will need another replacement and cause it to run into even more chaos. There was a heavy focus on his cough, so it does make me wonder how much longer he'll be around for. With regards to Toranaga, this episode really highlighted just how intelligent of a person he was and how close his ear was to the ground, mostly due to his spy. He believed his son was foolish over launching an attack on Jozen because he sparked an all-out war, so he took the Cannon Regiment away from him as a form of punishment. He felt as though his son was broken to the fist, which is where the title of the episode came from, and that he also felt as though he fell into the trap which was Omi's plan. So he treated his son like that, but then in the next breath he was telling Yabushige how he was impressed with Omi and that it was a good move because it meant that it forced Ishido into retaliating in Izu, rather than them having to attack Osaka, something which would have been a lot more dangerous. It felt like he mainly did this so that he could get underneath Yabushige's skin. Toranaga is playing everybody around him in his own personal way. There's no lack of loyalty, but he's aware of the lack of loyalty towards him, and he's using it to his advantage. Toranaga is the conductor of the orchestra that right now is playing out of time, and is almost playing different symphonies. Or actually, maybe a better way to put it is that they're all just on different pages of the sheet music, and it just doesn't sound good. John Blackthorne's time in Japan is something that is transformative for not only him, but also for the others that are around him. He's picking up the language more, something that's impressing the people in his home, and it's also something that's showing that he's being respectful to the people and the culture. So in response, he's also having people being more respectful to him. We saw this most when Toda Buntaro was reluctant to stay in John Blackthorne's home, and he asked Fuji-sama what it was like being the consort to the Anjin, and she said that she wouldn't know because she's consort to the Hatamoto. I don't know whether this is going to happen or not, but I kind of like the idea of Fujisama and Blackthorne getting together over him and Mariko if one does have to happen. We're seeing a relationship develop between the both of them in a bit more of a natural way, and what started as resistance between the both of them is turning into care and appreciation. The hand-holding at the end was something which definitely symbolized that transformation too. The whole scene that took place with Toda and John was one that was very much just a battle of who can be the manliest man and testosterone just filling up the room. Toda's distaste towards John was present, and even though Blackthorne couldn't understand everything, he knew what was going on due to the tone of what was being said. This all came to a climax when Toda Buntaro fired his arrow past Mariko's face twice, which put her in danger, and led John to say that she deserved courtesy, something that Toda didn't agree with. This is because of her past that we hadn't heard of and her family name. Mariko's father was called Akechi Jinsai, and he murdered Lord Kuroda-sama because he felt he lacked loyalty and was bad for the realm. As punishment, her father had to commit seppuku, but only after he killed all of Mariko's siblings and essentially the family line. She wanted to commit seppuku, but Toda Buntaro forbade her from ever doing that. When looking at the real history of what happened to the person that Mariko is inspired by, Tamako, her father Akechi Mitsuhide did actually betray and kill his lord Oda Nobunaga. Mitsuhide was a trusted general of Nobunaga who was a daimyo at the time and was one of the leading figures of the Sengoku period and is often regarded as the first great unifier of Japan. Mitsuhide was ordered to march and fight against the Mori clan alongside Hideyoshi, who went on to become the Taiko, but instead he ignored his orders and with an army of 13,000 men, he turned on Nobunaga. Whilst it's not known if he personally killed the daimyo, he's considered to be the very person who led the attack and ultimately took responsibility for the actions, hence why he was seen as the assassin. So it seems like the character in the book and the show stuck true to what actually occurred in history, and you can now understand why Mariko has the eightfold fence, because she doesn't actually want to be around. With John Blackthorne seeing Mariko being hurt by her husband, he confronted him in the garden as he left, and we saw Toda apologize for disrupting John's household and blamed the abuse on the sake that they were drinking. It was only once John was back behind the fence that he saw the two arrows that perfectly hit the post in the same spot that glided past Mariko's face. This was something which showed us just how good of a warrior and a marksman Toda is, bearing in mind he did that after consuming a lot of sake. So I got the impression John was glad that he didn't get into a fight with him in some way. With the rotting bird that had been left out the front of the property for the entire time, we saw that the gardener got rid of it and was ultimately killed as punishment. This is because John said that it was forbidden for it to be removed, something that got lost in translation. This sparked John into a moment of rage and for him to not understand the disregard of life that he felt the people had, how people would be killed for the most trivial of reasons. And he actually personally bore the weight of the gardener's death and felt as though he was responsible for it. Even though this was something that could have been arranged by Toranaga as he demanded his spy to find a new spy to take the blame. Something that we saw was actually the case at the end when the spy blamed the gardener for being the spy to Yabushige. The events of what happened with the gardener made John want to request to go back to England, something which was laughed at when he went to Toranaga. John was a prisoner of Japan. The illusion of him being free to roam is there, but it feels like he's never going to be able to get out. The real-life William Adams was never allowed to leave Japan, as Ieyasu Tokugawa forbade that from happening, and that means it's most definitely going to be the case with John, unless they change it drastically. In the closing moments of the episode, an earthquake occurred and it caused Toranaga to get buried beneath the surface, but again, being loyal to him, John jumped down and saved him, and when Toranaga couldn't find his swords, John gifted his to Toranaga. We found out in this episode that these swords were actually worthless, but with John handing them to Toranaga, showing that he respected him, it then meant that they then became valuable in a completely different way. The fact that earthquakes occur in that area, it meant that the houses in Japan had to be built as quickly as they could be torn down. And with the earthquake happening right at the end and destroying Izu, I think it's a metaphorical symbol for the rebuilding of Japan that's about to come. Lady Ochiba wants blood and to lose the politics, and Toranaga has been preparing for war, so there's now no escaping the war that's inevitably on the horizon. One of the last moments that I'll touch on is John picking up the stone in the garden. Earlier on, the gardener said that without a stone, a garden is just a place of growing, so the stone symbolized beauty in the garden. So with John putting the stone back up whilst death and destruction was present, that was him doing his bit, so to speak, in trying to rebuild things to how they were. It showed that he was committed to Japan and Toranaga despite what he previously said. My review of the episode. I thought this was a good episode of the show. Like I said, I felt like this one was always going to be a lot tamer. It's rare to get a couple of episodes in a row that are just all-out action, but I think we'll get that towards the end of the season when the war is in full swing. But this was a much-needed political play of an episode where we saw dynamics changing and us seeing just how aware of everything that Toranaga was. I knew what Mariko's story was going to be before going into the episode, but hearing it directly from her, it made it land with so much more impact. Seeing just how hurt she was and how she essentially didn't want to be alive was something which provided real conflicting feelings. I loved the polar opposite viewpoint that it felt like Blackthorne had at the end of the episode. He said that nobody there had any regard for life, but right at the end when he was walking through Izu and he saw the people that were struggling to survive, he saw that that wasn't the case at all. There was a clear value to life that was there. That whole final section when the earthquake happened was just simply incredible. I don't know about you, but when I was watching it, I felt a little bit emotional. It was so powerful. The score in the background playing underneath when John was walking through the town, it just captured horrific tragedy and was the backdrop to the haunting, somber devastation that was present. Lady Ochiba, even though she only had a few minutes, she definitely showed that she's going to be a force to be reckoned with. She wants blood, and it seems like she's prepared to do anything in order to protect the life of her son, the life of herself, and the status that she holds in Japan. She's currently the most powerful woman in Japan, and she won't want to lose that. I am really enjoying this show. I can't believe we're now halfway through it. However, I feel like from this moment on, we're going to have to hold on tight because it's only going to be getting even more epic from here. So, there you have it, Shogun Episode 5 Ending Explained. If you want to see more videos on Shogun, then click on the card in the top corner. I've been covering the show every week, and I've also been delving into the real people in history that inspired the characters. So if you want to see more, then it's over on the channel. Thanks for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one.